Joining us now on the line from Waterloo, Ontario, Christopher Ross. He is a professor in the Department of Religion and Culture at Wilfrid Laurier University. Christopher, it's good to see you there. How are you tonight?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Well, we've been studying death and dying all week on this program, and one angle that we haven't really covered yet is religion. So that's why we've got you in here tonight. And I want to start by just having you tell us, first of all, Christianity. We're coming up on Easter. Seems like a good place to start. How does Christianity approach the notion of death?
Well, I think it's obviously dominated by the death of its founder. And that was, in many ways, I think, a solitary death. And so I think one of the gifts of Christianity to our understanding of death, if that's the right term, is that it's a lonely thing. And the words of Jesus, I think on the cross attest to that. So there's a certain atmosphere that's communicated into our culture because Christianity, for most of us, is the dominating and dominant religion. So I think a sense of solitariness and of kind of ambiguity, I think. What's going to happen on the other side? And there's many different interpretations of the resurrection.
Hold off on that. We're going to follow up on that in a second. But since we're also in the middle of Passover, why don't we go to the Jewish religion and have you tell us how Judaism regards death?
Well, I think Judaism has the view that everything is created by God, and God created death, and so it must be good. And so it's seen as part of God's creation. And then, of course, I think you have to look, as we do in the Department of Religion and Culture, at the cultural experience of a religion. And of course, because of anti-Semitism, I think Judaism and death is seen as a source of solidarity because it's a shared collective fate. And of course, the rituals, the great rituals in Judaism around death, sitting Shiva, etc., kind of bring people together. So it's a slightly different resonance.
Okay, how do the concepts of heaven and hell shape how we look at death, in your view?
I think very strongly. I mean, I think there are three dominant metaphors that we have that summarize the prevailing attitudes to death. Death as wall, which is the atheist view, is like, yeah, snuff out the candle, that's it, nothing more. So it's like hitting the wall of no more consciousness. And then the Asian contribution of Hinduism and Buddhism in particular as death as door, where it's just seen as a bird moving from one nest to another with many rebirths, to the contribution of the great monotheisms of the world, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, where there's the idea in the mainstream, anyway, of death as courtroom, where there's a kind of a division between good and bad.
Now, you've described heaven and hell just now as a metaphor, and of course there are many among us in our society that believe in the literal heaven and hell. So do you need to change up your description in the way you just did it to accommodate that view?
Well, I mean, what is literal? I mean, is it going to be on coal, or is it going to be timber? I mean, I think the idea is that there's suffering in one place and bliss and joy in another.
Okay.
I think that's what's important. And I think what is more up for grabs in terms of contemporary debate among different kinds of believers is this the only kick at the can that we have? And I think mainstream Islam, Christianity, and Judaism says we have two lives. We have a very short life on this earth, and then we have a very long life in eternity. And it seems that you get voted one way or the other in a divisive kind of way, and that's challenged by Hinduism and Buddhism, which says death is a door. We've been here, as the Buddhists say, countless times, and this is like continual assessment. I mean, we have the opportunity to purify the wrong deeds and do more good ones, and it's a continual process, and we may eventually get to enlightenment.
think society-wide, though, for this next answer? Because all the public opinion polls tell us that there is a decreasing belief in our society in heaven and hell. And if that's true, what do you think that means for us?
Well, I think by analyzing the cause, we can get at the meaning. And I think the cause of that is we live not in a feudal society anymore, but in a meritocratic one where things are in process. I think, and I just had a response from my students. I teach a course on grief, loss, and death, and the heaven and hell thing doesn't make much sense. I mean, they're not used to the idea of pass or fail. It's like, how good are you doing? How, are you making progress? Are you going to get promoted? So the whole progressive notion of progress that's been with us since in modern times, since the rise of science, goes against the idea of an on-off switch. It's much more like a dimmer switch, you know, more or less, rather than this categorization into heaven and hell. And that's why I think there's a decline in belief.
Christopher, do you mind if I ask you a bit of a personal question?
Sure.
Okay, you're a Buddhist, right?
I am.
So what do you think happens to you after you die?
Well, I'm still internalizing the teachings, and I think it's a lot like dreaming, and it depends on the atmosphere in which one dies, and one trains oneself to actually, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Vajrayana tradition, that I've got most of my teachings in, to prepare for that by anticipating one's death and being peaceful at it, so that the good karma will ripen at one's death, and you keep your light on the light, and when negative things happen, you try to realize that these are just the projections of your own mind.
But does your religion tell you that there's something coming after your physical body has expired?
Oh yes, yeah, there's a continuing of consciousness, clearly.
And where do you think it goes?
And I think it depends. There's the teachings that I think it's 48 days, I'm not good on numbers, in the bardo state, the in-between state. And then you, by that time, usually one has selected or been selected through the ripening of one's karma into a fortunate rebirth, which is having another kick at the can, being a human being, which is in Buddhism seen as probably after nirvana the best place to be, because there's a lot of incentive and opportunity to make spiritual progress, or being in the animal realm, or one of the what's called the lower realms. And it depends on what ripens at the time.
Okay. I don't know this for a fact, but just looking at you, I'm guessing you're part of the baby boom generation, and therefore I'm going to ask you,
indeed.
In which case I'll ask you to speak on behalf of every baby boomer that's ever been born for this next answer.
Oh no.
And that is, you know, how are boomers regarding, or how are they approaching death presumably differently now that they are, you know, now that they've got more yesterdays than tomorrows in their lives, from a religious point of view?
Well, I think one of the things we're hated for is a sort of a certain presumptive entitlement.
Okay.
You know, certainly I grew up being a little, I guess, complacent and even snobbish towards my parents. So I can have the things that you have without having to make the sacrifices, and I'll do the things that I want, and I still enjoy the same standard of living. So there's a sort of a sense of agency that we have, and that if we do something, it will produce an effect. And I think the death education movement is a part of that culture of, well, let's also have a good death as well as a good life.
The death education movement, I've never heard that before. What's that a reference to?
Well, I mean, I think it got started with Kubler-Ross and an English woman, Cecile, who pioneered the hospice movement, where because of the atmosphere around death in the medical technocracy of the hospital, where death is seen as failure, and if the heroics didn't work, you know, that was it. There's an appreciation of the psychological aspect of death, and so the hospice is a place where people are left to die well. And I think the palliative care comes out of this approach where death is seen as an important part of life and not as a defeat. And I think the idea of having a good death and becoming educated about it, connecting it up as a psychologist that I am with loss, one can start to kind of break open the great taboo. I mean, death until recently has replaced sex as the taboo topic. Well, because Freud wouldn't be surprised. He thought death and sex were both important.
Yes, of course. Let's spend a bit of time then on the other side of your, because we did introduce you as being from the religion and culture department at Wilfrid Laurier. So we've talked the religion. Let's follow up a little more on the cultural aspect of it and this hospice movement. Do you think this is taking root in society right now as a more viable, legitimate, respected, acceptable option for those who know that the end is near?
Oh, I think so, and I hope so. And it's not only with hospices that are built as buildings, but also outreach by the people in that hospital in that hospice to go into people's homes so that they're comforted there as well. And of course, what you need is a sense of kind, connected relationship, and with people's mobility in a large continent like North America, we're scattered. So I think in many ways the hospice movement helps to provide that connection when family members aren't so easily available, especially if it's a long death, a long dying.
Okay, another follow-up on the cultural aspect, because of course 50 years ago in the movies, if somebody were shot and killed, you wouldn't see a drop of blood. It would look actually kind of cool. Similarly, I guess if you were dying in the hospital, not a plethora of tubes coming out of your body and not shriveling away. I think of Ronald Reagan and Get One for the Gipper. You know, again, almost a kind of romantic vision of death. If you look at the images of fictional death in movies and television today, how has it changed?
Well, I think the hero is problematic since the Second World War, just as science has been seen as problematic with the Hiroshima bomb. So one isn't concerned so much with heroes. One's concerned with connection and relationship rather than just doing something courageous. And I'm worried sometimes with the idea of dying well, because it's just another task that now we have to die well, baby boomers. You know, not only do we have to age well, we have to die well. But I think, all things considered, I think we have a much more relaxed approach to dying. But it depends very much on I think, the pocket of culture in Canada that you're dealing with.
Well, since you've opened the door, let's go through it in our last minute here. I presume you are a person, given what you teach and how you live, who has thought about how he would like to exit this world. And if you have, would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Well, thank you. Yes, I think I'd like to be around people who are in contact with their love for me, and their love for all beings, and a sense of peace that we can share together. Certainly, I was very privileged to have that with my sister being present to our mother, and it's really connected us in the last part of our lives. And so I think there is a sense of passing on the torch of connection to a good death that makes it very meaningful to me. I think I'd be okay.
Christopher Ross, that is a lovely way to put it. Thanks so much for your time tonight.